Okay, let's take a deep dive. Think about just the last hour or two of your day.
Yeah.
Did you find yourself scrolling your phone like the second you woke up?
Oh, definitely happened.
Or maybe you drove the same route, walked the dog, didn't even really think about the turns?
Oh, autopilot, right.
Exactly. Or
Okay.
grab that, mid-morning snack. Same place, same thing.
Yeah.
Almost like you weren't even choosing.
Yeah, if that sounds familiar, you're not alone.
It's really remarkable how much of our lives just runs on these automatic sequences.
It feels like a lot.
Well, William James, way back,
Yeah.
gosh, 1892, I think, he was onto something, called life itself a bundle of routines.
A bundle of routines. I like that.
And, fast forward, more recent research like that Duke University study found that over 40% of what we do every day, not conscious decisions, just habits.
40%. That's almost half our waking hours run by these like invisible scripts.
Pretty much makes you wonder what they're actually controlling, doesn't it?
It really does. And they're quietly steering everything. Our money habits, our health, how we interact with people, they're incredibly powerful.
Okay, so for this deep dive, we're really going to try and peel back the layers on why these patterns exist, how they work.
Mm-hmm.
We've been digging into the sources you shared, articles, research, your notes, and a lot drawing from Charles Duhigg's book, The Power of Habit, right?
That's right. It pulls together so much great stuff, studies, interviews, real stories, all trying to get at the science of why we do what we do.
And the goal here, the mission, is really to decode how habits form, how they operate.
So you can actually gain the power to reshape them, break the ones holding you back, build new ones that actually stick, ones that help.
Right, like finally getting the remote control instead of just being stuck on autopilot. So, okay, where do we start? How do these things even form?
It all comes down to what researchers call the habit loop. That's the basic structure.
The loop, okay.
Yeah, habits get etched into our brains through repetition, and it's usually a 3-step pattern. Starts with a trigger or a cue that prompts a routine.
The action.
Right, the behavior itself. And that leads to a reward. Trigger, routine, reward.
Like those classic psych experiments, right? The mice hitting a lever when a light comes on
Exactly.
to get a treat.
Oh.
Or rats learning mazes until they just run through them.
Exactly. That repetition just hardwires the whole sequence. But, the sources you shared have some really powerful human stories too, like the case study of Greg.
Oh, yeah, tell me about Greg.
He had this severe viral encephalitis. It basically wiped out huge parts of his memory. Couldn't remember yesterday, couldn't remember who he was talking to an hour ago.
Wow. That sounds devastating. How could he learn anything new?
You'd think he couldn't, but the virus, it mostly spared this deep part of his brain called the basal ganglia.
Okay, I've heard of that. That's the habit center, right?
Exactly. It's crucial for habits, for procedural memory. And because that part was intact, even with profound amnesia, Greg could still form new habits, just through sheer repetition.
Like what kind of habits?
Well, he learned to identify objects again. He learned to navigate his neighborhood on walks. It wasn't conscious memory telling him where to go. It was his basal ganglia building these automatic pathways, cue, routine, reward. His success wasn't remembering, it was those neurons just building new connections through practice.
Wow. So even if the thinking part of your brain is offline, the habit engine can keep running.
Precisely. And that really highlights why our brains rely on this system so much. It's incredibly efficient.
Frees up mental energy, right?
Totally. Imagine having to consciously think through every single tiny step of buttoning your shirt every morning.
Oh, God, no. Or tying shoes.
Right. The sources mention patients who do have damage to their basal ganglia. They struggle massively with basic stuff like that because they lack the automatic function. They're just overloaded with choices.
Whereas for most of us, tying shoes, making coffee, even driving home, it just happens. Our, higher brain is off planning dinner or worrying about work.
While the basal ganglia just handles the mechanics, that's why you can sometimes drive home and suddenly think, whoa, I don't remember the last 5 miles.
Yeah, been there. Habit loop took the wheel.
Exactly. And here's where it gets tricky. This is why changing bad habits is so hard. The brain, it doesn't really judge if a routine is good or bad.
It just runs the program.
Right. The loop for automatically grabbing, say, an apple when you're hungry uses the same basic wiring as the loop for automatically reaching for a cigarette when you're stressed. They're just blueprints wired in. Breaking them takes more than just saying, I won't do that anymore.
Okay, so the trigger routine reward loop is the foundation. But Some habits feel way more powerful than others, almost compulsive. What makes them stick so hard? What was the missing piece?
Ah, yeah, this is where it gets really interesting. Researchers found this crucial extra element, maybe the glue that holds it all together, craving.
Craving, the mental itch you mentioned before.
Exactly that. Habits become super powerful, super automatic when the brain starts begging for the reward, when there's this intense anticipation baked into the loop.
Okay, examples.
Well, the sources talk about Febreze. Remember when it first came out?
Vaguely. Didn't it kind of bomb initially?
It did. Because they marketed it purely as like an odor eliminator, get rid of bad smells.
No.
But people didn't crave the absence of smell. It wasn't rewarding enough.
Huh. So what changed?
They realized people using it in their cleaning routine needed a satisfying end signal, a reward. So they tweaked the marketing, maybe the formula slightly, I don't know, but they linked it to the feeling of freshness after cleaning. That final spritz on the clean couch.
Oh, the finishing touch.
Right. The cue became finishing cleaning, the routine was spraying Febreze, and the reward wasn't just no smell, it was that feeling of clean, of freshness, of accomplishment. People started craving that feeling.
That makes sense.
Oh.
And the Pips and It's story. The toothpaste.
Oh, classic example from the sources. Claude Hopkins, this advertising legend, added stuff like citric acid and mint oils. Not really for better cleaning, apparently.
So why?
For the tingle. That icy zap, as they called it. It created a sensation. People finished brushing, felt that tingle, and their brain went, clean. They started craving that specific feeling. Without it, their mouth just didn't feel right.
So he wasn't just selling clean teeth, he was selling the sensation of clean.
Exactly. Like the source said, a mouthful of glittery anxiety relief. It became this addictive hook other products copied. The foam and toothpaste, the tingle in some shampoos. It's the feeling that triggers the craving.
So it's not just getting the reward, it's the anticipation of the reward, the craving for that feeling.
That's the key. Neuroscience backs this up. There was this experiment with Julio the monkey.
Right, I read about that.
They trained him to expect juice when certain pictures appeared. At first, his brain's reward centers lit up when he got the juice. But after a while, the big spike in activity happened when the pictures appeared, before the juice.
He was craving it. Anticipating it.
Intensely. That craving is what links the cue to the routine. It drives the action.
And you see it everywhere once you look. Fast food isn't just selling burgers.
No.
They're masters of triggered cravings. The golden arches, the specific smell, even how the fries dissolve quickly for that instant dopamine hit.
Before you even process the taste. And gyms, they sell the craving for the endorphin high afterwards, right? Or the satisfaction of hitting a goal.
Without that craving, that mental itch for the payoff.
Habits just fade, like New Year's resolutions in February. So the big takeaway is, if you want to change a habit, you often have to deal with the craving. Maybe not eliminate it, but find a new way to satisfy it.
Okay, so how? How do you actually rewire these things? The sources talk about a golden rule of habit change, right? Based partly on things like AA.
Yes, the golden rule. It's actually pretty straightforward but powerful. You keep the old cue, you keep the same reward the old habit delivered, but you consciously insert a new routine.
Okay, so keep the trigger, keep the end goal feeling, just change the middle action.
Exactly. So let's say your cue is stress at work. Your old routine is stepping out for a cigarette. The reward you crave is stress relief, maybe just a break.
Right.
Using the golden rule, you keep the cue, stress, and the desired reward, relief break, but you replace the routine. Instead of smoking, maybe you take a quick, brisk walk around the block.
Like Lisa Allen in The Sources, who quit smoking that way.
Precisely. She identified her cues, stress, boredom, and the reward she sought, relief, distraction. She swapped the smoking routine for a walking routine. Same cue, same reward, new routine. Her brain started building pathways around the walking.
And Alcoholics Anonymous uses this too.
Very much so. Members face their old cues, stress, loneliness, certain times or places. The craving for relief or connection is still there. But they replace the drinking routine with new ones. Going to a meeting, calling their sponsor, talking it through.
They swap the destructive routine for a supportive one.
Yes. And the community support, the belief system that reinforces the new routine, helps them manage the craving and get through tough spots.
This feels super practical. Like, if you want to stop hitting snooze, cue, alarm rings, old routine, hit snooze, reward. Few more minutes of sleep, avoid cold floor.
Okay, so apply the rule. Keep the cue, alarm. You still want the reward, maybe silence or just easing into the day. Change the routine.
Put the alarm across the room.
There you go. Now the cue alarm forces a new routine. Get out of bed to turn it off. Reward is silence, plus you're already up. You broke the old pattern.
Or eating healthier. Cue. Tired after work. Hungry. Craving. Comfort. Easy satisfaction. Old routine. Order pizza.
So keep the cue, hunger stress. Aim for the reward, satisfaction, maybe feeling good physically. New routine. Make the healthy option the easy option. Prep some veggies ahead of time. Hide the takeout menus.
So when the cue hits, reaching for the prep veggies is the path of least resistance.
Exactly. You satisfy the hunger, get the reward, but with a different behavior. It's about identifying the loop and then consciously practicing a new routine until it becomes the default. It takes awareness and effort.
Definitely not instant, but doable. And beyond just changing one habit, the sources talk about something called keystone habits. These sound like game changers.
Oh, keystone habits are fascinating. They're routines that, when you change them, don't just affect that one behavior. They set off a chain reaction.
The domino effect.
Exactly. They reshape lots of other areas in your life, or even in a whole company. They have this disproportionate impact.
The big example is Paul O'Neill at Alcoa, the aluminum company.
Right. He took over when they were struggling. Wall Street expected him to talk about profits, cutting costs. Instead, his first speech was all about worker safety.
Making safety the #1 non-negotiable priority. Seemed weird to investors.
Totally counterintuitive, but O'Neill knew it was a keystone. To make the workplace dramatically safer, they had to understand why accidents happened, which meant
They had to improve communication, management, talking to workers.
exactly. It forced process changes on the factory floor. It built trust because workers saw safety was genuinely the top priority.
And he put teeth into it, right? Like executives had 24 hours to report an injury and have a prevention plan, promotions tied to safety.
Yes. It wasn't just a slogan. It was engineering a culture of care, communication, and accountability around this one keystone habit: safety.
And the result wasn't just fewer injuries.
It led to huge improvements in efficiency, quality, and profits. Because fixing safety meant fixing underlying operational problems everywhere. It was strategic genius, focusing on that one critical lever.
And you see this keystone idea elsewhere too, like Starbucks, training employees on handling stress.
Right, scripting calm responses, builds their willpower muscle, as the sources call it, which helps in other areas. It's a keystone for customer service and employee resilience.
Or West Point, cultivating grit through rituals.
Like those Iron Squad check-ins. Building camaraderie and accountability, keystone for leadership. NASA celebrating calculated risks. EPA rewarding bold action. It's about finding those core routines that unlock wider change.
And it works personally too, like the weight loss study.
Yeah, that was striking. People were just asked to keep a food diary. That's it.
Just tracking what they ate.
That simple act became a keystone habit. It made them more aware. They started noticing patterns, planning meals better, making other small changes. And they lost significantly more weight than the control group just from that one habit. It's finding those critical entry points.
So habits shape us, they shape companies. But the sources go even bigger, right, to society.
Yes, collective habits, shared routines. They're like the social glue. The Montgomery bus boycott is such a powerful example of this.
Rosa Parks' arrest was the spark, the trigger.
It was a trigger, absolutely. But the movement, its strength, and how long it lasted came from habits and networks already built into the Black community there.
The church groups, sewing circles, just neighborhood connections.
Exactly. These existing social habits provided the structure. They allowed for communication, organizing carpools, mutual support. It created this sense of shared identity and purpose.
The sources mention the power of weak ties, too.
Yeah, that's crucial. Your close friends give you that core support. But for a mass movement, you need the broader community, the neighbors, the people you nod to at church or the store. Their participation creates this quiet pressure. Not joining the boycott felt like letting down the whole community, not just your best friend.
It became the collective habit of resistance.
Right. And leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. helped frame it, giving it an identity. Nonviolence wasn't just a tactic, it became an identity-based habit. We meet hate with love. Facing down violence with hymns and dignity became their practiced routine.
That's powerful. And there was the Rick Warren Church example, too, building community through small groups.
Yeah, Saddleback Church. Huge church, but built on a foundation of small, home-based Bible study groups. These became the pulse, weaving faith into daily life through shared rituals, accountability, turning abstract ideas into practiced habits within a supportive community. scale, but also intimacy through shared routines.
Okay, so habits are clearly fundamental forces. But there's a dark side too, isn't there? When habits override everything else.
Definitely. The sources don't shy away from that. When habits become involuntary, overriding logic, overriding conscious choice, it can lead to tragedy.
Like gambling addiction, the story of Angie Bachman.
Right. Started as maybe an escape, a habit to break monotony, but it became compulsive. And the casino, hurrahs, they understood habit loops all too well.
They tracked her playing habits.
Offered personalized rewards, comps, free trips, credit lines, things that felt like perks but were actually triggers and rewards designed to exploit her vulnerability, keep her hooked. For addicts, even near misses can trigger the brain's reward system like a win, fueling the cycle.
It's predatory, really. Using the science of habit against someone.
It raises huge ethical questions, and then there's the Brian Thomas case. So tragic.
The man who killed his wife during a sleep terror.
Yes. The sources explain sleepwalking as, like, a glitch where the brain doesn't paralyze the body during sleep. And sleep terrors are this primal panic, tapping into deep survival circuits, habit circuits, that can completely bypass rational thought.
He thought she was an intruder, right, acted automatically.
That was the defense. Automatism. His body acted on autopilot, driven by the terror and ingrained defense routines, completely detached from conscious awareness or intent.
And the legal outcome highlighted a real paradox.
A stark one. Thomas was acquitted. His actions were deemed involuntary, a biological malfunction. Biology essentially pardoned him.
But Angie Bachman, whose gambling addiction also felt involuntary, a compulsion that ruined her life.
She was sued by the casino for her debts. Her compulsion was prosecuted. Neurologically, you could argue both were prisoners of powerful brain patterns hijacking conscious control. But the law drew a line.
It shows just how complex this is and how powerful these automatic processes can be for good or ill.
Absolutely.
Okay, so wrapping this deep dive up, we've covered a lot. From the basic habit loop trigger, routine, reward, crucially powered by that craving, to understanding that loop is the key to changing it. The golden rule of swapping the routine.
Right, keeping the cue and reward.
We looked at keystone habits, those power levers like safety at Alcoa, or keeping a food diary that trigger wider change.
How they ripple through lives and organizations.
We saw how collective habits shape whole societies, like in Montgomery, built on existing community ties.
And then the darker side, where habits become compulsions or involuntary actions with devastating results.
So bring it back to where we started. That morning autopilot, scrolling the phone, driving the same route.
Those are just the surface signs, right? The visible tips of the iceberg. Habits are running so much underneath.
But the point of this whole exploration, the insight from the sources, is that understanding the code gives you the remote control.
Exactly. Habits aren't fate. They aren't set in stone.
By cracking their code, seeing the trigger, the routine, the reward, and the craving, you really do hold a roadmap.
A roadmap to figure out why you do, what you're really seeking with that habit, and how you can consciously start to rewrite the routine or build new ones. Find those keystones.
It's about recognizing these invisible forces and then making conscious choices, rewriting your own story, one routine at a time.
It really is. So keep exploring these patterns in your own life. That's the takeaway. Pay attention to those autopilot moments. Ask yourself, what just triggered that? What did I just do? What was the reward or the feeling I was chasing?
That awareness, that's step one, the absolutely crucial first step.
It takes patience, sure, and some experimentation. But the science, the stories, they show that change, real transformation, is absolutely possible once you understand how habits work.
Absolutely. Keep observing, keep experimenting, keep rewriting that script.